Welcome to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private.
Hello again. Welcome back to another episode of the Recovery Cast, proudly brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private. My name is Oliver and I'm a former addict in recovery. The Recovery Cast is a podcast created by people in recovery from addiction for people in recovery from addiction. There are many definitions of addiction, but we keep it simple. Addiction to us is when people use alcohol, drugs, or certain behaviours repetitively to their detriment. Basically, when it's a problem for them and their families. Therefore, an addict is not necessarily a needle-using junkie in a dark laneway, and an alcoholic is not necessarily a homeless man in a park. Recovery for us means using an active daily process or program to deal with alcohol use disorder, substance use disorder, or other behavioural addictions. People in recovery are committed to complete abstinence. This daily process is as important to being able to live normal lives as daily dialysis is for people with kidney problems. This podcast is meant as a support tool for those in recovery. I myself am a drug addict, however, each day we will focus on a different perspective of recovery. Everyone who participates in the podcast is in an active recovery program. We are not affiliated with any one recovery methodology and will focus on a variety of different types of recovery programs, including 12-step recovery programs like Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, and other programs like Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, Recovery Dharma, Cognitive Behavioural Therapy, and more. And a quick disclaimer, this podcast is intended to be informative. A podcast alone cannot support your sobriety and recovery, so we suggest it only as one component of a daily recovery routine. For more information on what recovery is, go to www.rehab.melbourne. Today, it is the 2nd of November, and we're going to be taking a look at meditation. Today's reading is from the Alcoholics Anonymous Daily Reflections, November the 2nd, Keeping Optimism Afloat. The other steps can keep most of us sober and somehow functioning, but step 11 can keep us growing, the language of the heart, page 240. A sober alcoholic finds it much easier to be optimistic about life. Optimism is the natural result of my finding myself gradually able to make the best rather than the worst of each situation. As my sobriety continues, I come out of the fog, gain a clearer perspective, and am better able to determine what courses of action to take. As vital as physical sobriety is, I can achieve a greater potential for myself by developing an ever-increasing willingness to avail myself of the guidance and direction of a higher power. My ability to do so comes from my learning and practicing the principles of the AA program. The melding of my physical and spiritual sobriety produces the substance of a more positive life. So what they're kind of talking about there is step 11, which is we sought through prayer and meditation to increase our conscious contact with the God of our understanding. I'm paraphrasing here, praying only for His will for us and the power to carry that out. So it's very much another one of those spiritual higher power-y kind of steps, which is maybe it can be strange for people. It was for me when I first sort of got into recovery and started doing this stuff. But really what it's all about for me is that prayer and meditation, which brings us to what we're going to be talking about today, which is meditation. But I just want to go into the reading a little bit more. They talk about how when you're in recovery, it's easier to be more optimistic about life. And I think for me, now that my reality is not clouded by using and that really angry negative state that I was in, that paranoia, it is true that I am more optimistic, perhaps quietly optimistic and content. It's that, and that's the result of me finding myself gradually more able to make the best rather than the worst of each situation, which is what they said. That's true. We don't go around sabotaging our lives anymore now that we're in recovery. And that's true. When we remain physically sober or, abstain from using, we come out of the fog and gain a clearer perspective of our lives, and we're better able to determine what we need to do. We're not having our addiction fuel our actions anymore. We're acting from a place of clarity. And they just sum recovery up really well, is that there's so much more clarity. And it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in that first week that you're clean. I think for me, that clarity didn't come until much, much later, probably about 6 months clean. I began to have a little bit more clarity, and that's just it. Is scientifically, it takes the brain a little bit of time to repair itself, and those pathways that were strengthened in the brain from using, we really, in terms of neuroplasticity and the brain's ability to rewire itself, we have to actually relearn, and our brain has to change, and it's a huge change from what I went through from using every day and my entire focus in my life being on getting that next drug or that next drink, getting a little bit of relief from my internal environment. Now it's totally different. And over the last 4 years plus, my brain it's changed, and I've actually become an adult for the first time in my life, So that's really what it's about. And how do we get that mental clarity? How do we learn to have that clarity to make those good decisions in our recovery and in our lives? I think meditation is an enormous part of that. And what they were talking about as well was actually the spiritual principles. So being honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. I think those are the spiritual principles that I've built my recovery upon, of being honest with myself, honest with the people around me, to say, well, I'm not doing well, I need to talk to someone about it. Even in recovery, I still, whenever I get a feeling that I can't deal with, I call someone who's got that experience in recovery. And then the open-mindedness, I'm open-minded and willing to try new things for my recovery, and open-minded enough to put aside my preconceived ideas and say, well, maybe I'll try this. And the last week has been a great example of that. I've been to some smart recovery meetings, I've been to some recovery Dharma meetings, and I've been expanding my recovery because I need that experience to bring here to these episodes and tell you about them. So we'll do some episodes about those recovery programs. I think the next episode we're going to do is about my second smart recovery meeting and what my experience was like there. Basically, I'm trying to show you guys all the stuff that's on offer at Hills and Ranges Private as part of their recovery program, and how they help their clients, basically. And meditation is another one of those, is that I know that is done at Hills and Ranges Private, that meditation is part of the recovery program, and that is how you get that inner clarity that they're talking about in the reading today. So yeah, meditation, wow, it's such a powerful tool. And let me talk to you a little bit about my experience with meditation. I've been diagnosed with ADHD, and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is something that usually occurs in children and teenagers, but I actually have adult ADHD. And it's a hyperactive, impulsive sort of thing for me, is that my mind is always racing, I'm always doing stuff, I'm very impulsive, and what that actually looks like in terms of my life today is that there are a lot of things that are half finished around the house, and there's a lot of mess and stuff like that I'm dealing with. And I can't take medication for that because it's a narcotic, so that contravenes my recovery and basically what I've set for myself. I'm not here to talk about kind of that medical thing, and I don't offer medical advice. I'm not a medical practitioner, but that's just my experience, is that my mind is racing so much that I find it incredibly difficult to meditate. When I sit down, my thoughts are just swimming around me, and I can't go for more than about 10 seconds or 5 seconds even without having something come into my head, whether it's planning for the future or just thinking about things in the past. And, I think that's actually the reality for people who don't have ADHD. Everybody's mind thinks. The mind is a thinking machine. It is what we use to navigate our way through our lives, but we should be able to sort of put it in sleep mode, basically, and just experience that feeling of transcending thoughts and just being in the moment. That's what meditation is for me, and that's why I'm striving and trying to achieve that. I'm going to talk about how I do that after the break.
You're listening to the Recovery Cast by Hills and Rangers Private. Now playing daily on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. For more shows, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.
Let's talk more about meditation. You're on the Recovery Cast with Oliver. So meditation for me, I have mentioned this before. I've tried lots of different kinds of meditation. I've joined a yoga studio in recovery, and I was going to meditation classes there, and I would frequently find that lying on my back, I would fall asleep. And I've tried lots of different kinds of meditation. I did a recovery Dharma meeting last night, and there was a chunk of meditation that is part of that meeting that I did, which I got a lot out of. That's one option. But the one that I find most successful for me is I use an app called Waking Up by Sam Harris, who is a spiritual teacher. I guess he's an incredible voice that guides me through the meditations, and every day it's a different meditation as part of this Waking Up course. I downloaded this app, and I'm not sponsored by them or affiliated with them. I'm just giving you guys one option, and that's what worked for me and is working for me at the moment. It's a guided meditation, and it's not intrusive. It sort of gives me lots of time to keep trying to meditate. And then he gently comes in and tells me that, when thoughts start to intrude, just pay attention to the thoughts and see what happens to them. And usually what happens when I'm thinking about something, and then he comes in and tells me to pay attention to my thought disappears, and then I try and look for where it comes from. It's amazing how just what he talks about is consciousness and awareness, and how every single thing that I feel is coming from this state of consciousness and awareness. So the feeling of breathing, the feeling of thinking, my visual field, whether my eyes are closed or open, I have this visual field. I have tension or feelings in my body, cold, hot, tingling, and it all comes from the same place of just consciousness, and it appears in consciousness. So it doesn't matter whether I've got a tingling in my foot when I'm meditating, or I feel a breeze on my skin, or I have my eyes shut and I'm looking into the sort of visual field behind my closed eyes. It all comes from the same place, and I just gently sit there and I watch it and try and experience it. And what he gets me to do is I realize that it all comes from consciousness, and that my body actually loses its shape. So I don't think about that tingling in my foot and say, yep, that's my foot. I think that is a feeling that's appearing in consciousness from the same place as my visual field and the same place as my breathing. It's just all in this cloud of awareness. And thoughts will pop up inevitably for me, probably every 5 to 10 seconds. And sometimes I get lost in thought. And when I get lost in thought, he brings me back and says, well, pay attention to your thoughts. And I'll be thinking about something from the past usually. So I'll be replaying a scenario or something, that's usually where my mind goes of some interaction that I had, and I'll think about it and I'll think, I don't know, let's give you an example, that I forgot to put the bins out last night, and I now have 2 weeks worth of recycling in a bin and nowhere to put my recycling. Good one, Oliver. And I'll be thinking about that. Oh, I should have gotten out of bed when I heard the recycling truck come into the street. I'll be thinking about that. And then what will happen is the voice of Sam Harris will come in and say, and when you're lost in thought, just pay attention to that thought and see where that thought's coming from. And then that will get me right out of that train of thought, and I'll be thinking, oh no, I won't be thinking, I'll be just looking at that thought, and then it will just disappear because I'm not actually continuing that narrative in my head. And really what meditation is for me is I'm just sitting there watching the scenery of my head go by, and that might, my awareness, so that might be thoughts coming and going, feelings coming and going, emotions coming and going. And the whole thing about this is the goal, or what I get out of meditation is I'm actually, I can actually see that all these things come and go. So these thoughts, feelings, sensations, moods, they all come and go in consciousness, in awareness. And that gives me this kind of separation from myself, where it's like I'm sitting behind myself looking at this movie of my life. And it means that I'm not so desperately close to my situation. It gives me a little bit of separation, and that's incredibly powerful. It's almost like I'm sitting in a movie theater watching the film of my life. And that it just separates me from myself, and it means that I'm actually able to see my life with a little bit of bit more clarity. And that's the clarity that they're talking about in the reading. If you've meditated before and struggle, or if you've never meditated before, it doesn't matter whether you're in recovery or you're just listening to this podcast because you're a family member. Meditation is for everyone. It's not just for someone in recovery. That's the beautiful thing about it. I think what I would suggest to get out of this episode is maybe take some time today to try meditating. You can do it anywhere. You can do it before you start the engine in your car, before you go somewhere. You can do it when you are about to go to sleep. You can do it when you're just sitting in your chair and just see everything around you and experience that awareness without it being clouded by thought and that narrative that's going on inside our heads all the time. I know I talked about, me having ADHD before, and I think this mindfulness and meditation is actually an incredible way for me to treat that and live with that, because when I am going through that and experiencing that, my mind's going everywhere, and then I just bring myself back to the present moment and observe what's going on right now, and it just grounds me a little bit. We get that opportunity being in recovery and having that clarity that we can make these choices for ourselves, and it helps us, and that's just one of the things that's on offer at Hills and Ranges Private. We learn, You learn these things there, and meditation is just another tool that we can use in our recovery to just help ourselves and make our lives, not just tolerable, but beautiful. I think I went through a lot of my life completely subconsciously unaware of things, and now I've done meditation and do daily meditation. I'm actually more aware, and I'm able to experience my life in a more full and beautiful way. So yeah, how cool is that? Meditation. Give it a go. That app, Waking Up by Sam Harris, is available. And in the meantime, if you've got any questions, just go to www.rehab.melbourne. Check out the Hills and Ranges private website. Thanks for listening to another episode. My name's Oliver, and I will see you next time. Have an awesome day. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Recovery Cast. For more, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.